Hi, my name is Josephine and these are my creatures. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's repaint is going to be a very special one because we are going to be repainting this giant head. I got this Frankie styling head secondhand from a thrift store. She has definitely seen better days. Oh my, someone loved her eyes out. But we will be giving her a royal treatment and turning her into a queen. Marie Antoinette to be exact, so keep on watching. I begin the same way as always by removing what remains of her face paint. I also cut all her hair off. She will be getting nice new locks later on. I am not separating the head from the neck this time because I will highly doubt that I will be able to get it back on. Also, the vinyl on these large heads is way thicker than your normal monster idol, so they don't have any give to them. A nice stubble is what we have to work on. I was going to remove the base that is attached to her neck, but decided to keep it for now so that she can stand on her own while I work on her. I sprayed her with Ms.SuperClear and then start defining her features with pastels. I've had this idea in my head ever since I found this styling head 3 years ago, but I'm only now getting into creating it. One of my all-time favorite movies that I still enjoy rewatching to this day is the 2006 Marie Antoinette, directed by Sofia Coppola. I adore the visuals and the subtle but important modernizations to the 18th century fashion, architecture and culture. The movie is still able to convey the story of a young, spoiled and naive girl that ends up having very little control of her own life and the narrative of her character. That is very much true to Marie Antoinette's real life, or what we can gather from the history books. This art piece is not going to be historically accurate, rather a representation of the two most iconic things about her that we as people living in the 20th century now know about her. The fact that she was beheaded with a guillotine, and the story of when she was told that the peasants didn't have any bread to eat, she responded, and please excuse my French, qu'ils mangent de la brioche, which translates to let them eat cake. Historians to this day don't know if she actually said those oh-so-famous words, or maybe they were a popular slander thrown at her by the papers of the time. I personally don't think she actually said that, but the people were so up in arms about their poverty and miserable lives that they needed someone to hate, and the press provided that. Now the king at the time, Louis XVI, was an imbecile of a king and ended up spending a fortune showing off to the British by funding the American Revolution. As a king, I don't think it's particularly smart to help other people get rid of their king and then make your subjects pay for that said rebellion. But I am not a historian, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. So, this doll is not going to be a portrait of the actual Marie Antoinette, but the embodiment of the stereotypes that people associate with her. That she would have had to have been spoiled and stupid, that she deserved her fate, because she was so ignorant and out of touch. Kind of like a caricature done in a pop art style. I personally think she was a creation of her surroundings. She lived in a completely different world to everyone else, having to leave everything behind, all her friends, her mother and even her beloved dog at such a young age, to be married off to some future king and being scrutinized for taking too long to produce an heir for that king, and losing one of her children. Her life was unfathomable in so many ways, but yet so very relatable in others. No wonder we are still fascinated by her life centuries after her death. Speaking of her death, I want this doll head to be a pop art style version of someone just taking her severed head and plopping it on top of a cake and being like, here's some cake for you. And I want the expression of the doll to be this Mean Girls vibe, I don't really care, just eat your damn cake, even though I'm bleeding all over it. That's why I did one brow arched up and her lips have a slight tilt to them. But her eyes are very expressionless, like she doesn't really care. I also decided to keep Frankie's green skin tone. To play into that severed head idea, it's a little zombie-esque, and I do love pink and mint green together. And Sofia Coppola's movie was very much pastels. These powdery scenes, kind of like a gilded cage. It is very much a stereotype that the 18th century was all about pastels, when in reality there is plenty of evidence, like portraits of Marie Antoinette wearing dark, rich jewel tones more often than pastels. But we are going for all the stereotypes for the maximum camp effect. She needs to have a beauty mark. Did you know that they used to cover syphilis warts with the beauty marks? And instead of drawn on like I'm doing, they would be an actual patch of fabric or other suitable material. The more you know. One thing that is accurate is her eye color. Marie Antoinette did have light blue eyes. I tried to avoid using black on her because I felt it would be too harsh. But I did use some black to shade her eyes. Her upper lash line is done in a dark grey, her lashes too. But the creases on her eyes are drawn on using purple. I added some white Panpastel to create that powdery look on her face. I sealed her face with another coat of MSC. I had mixed some magic sculpt for a different project, so while I had some out, I filled in the earring holes and pushed in these shortened pins for some bling. A few catch lights on her eyes and a coat of MSC, and then we can call her face done. Because this head is so large, I decided to go with this jumbo braid instead of my usual nylon hair. Using jumbo braids for doll hair was a great tip I picked up from Melissa over at Moonlight Jewel. I used the plastic packaging and some glue to create wefts from the loose hair. After the glue is dry, I can peel off the plastic and trim the edges. I also feather out my initial chomp. The hair was a bit messy from being in the package, so I used my straightener to tame it back. For this hairstyle, I need to start at the front and work around the hairline, gluing down the wefts. I have only plans to do the hairline very densely and leave the rest of the head bald to reduce bulk and make it easier to style. For the piece of hair that hangs down, I decided to use this scrap piece of pre-made wefts. I have no other use for it, and I think it will look nicer as a loose curl than the more textured jumbo braid. That works so well for the rest of the hairstyle, specifically because of the texture. After the hairline is filled in, I glue some wefts for the side curls, and then start gluing wefts facing the other way round. I let this dry before I pull it up to see if I missed any spots. I had already used all the wefts I had made, so I quickly made some more from the hair that I still had. I did end up using 3 of the 4 strands that came in that one package. I filled in the missing areas with new wefts, keeping in mind what direction I want them to be in for the final hairstyle. I sectioned the hair off for the side curls and pull everything else back. I tied the hair in 3 different sections to help it lay in the direction I need it to be in. I then take my blow dryer and start smoothing all the flyaways. This will also help flip the wefts at the hairline, creating a neat edge. I then began to curl the hair. I tested out using a curling iron for the side parts. It worked okay, but because this tool does not have a temperature control, I had to keep flipping it on and off so that it would not get too hot and melt the synthetic hair. The curl was too big and a bit messy, so I decided to use rollers instead. I would have liked them to be a smidge smaller, but I think they will work in the end. I used the smaller pink ones on the sides and the 2 blue ones on top and bottom, where I knew I wanted the hair to be more smooth in the end. All the rollers are rolled so that they face either up or out from the face. I don't have enough of the regular rollers, so for the back of her head I've used these noodle looking ones that you need a hook for to pull the hair through. This is more random when it comes to the placement of them, but I do try and keep the sections a similar size to get even curls in the end. When all her hair is up in curlers, I boil some water in a large pot. I dunk the curls in, avoiding the very roots where the glue is. Because I was impatient, I tried speeding up the drying time with my hairdryer. I did test one strand and it wasn't dry yet, so in the end I had to give up and leave it to dry overnight. The next day I could come back and start taking out the curlers and start styling the hair. I first backcombed the middle section. I created as much volume as I could out of the middle sections because that classic 18th century hairstyle is massive. Funny enough, it was only popular for a very short period of time. And Marie Antoinette actually wore her hair short, small and curly a lot more. But I think the larger-than-life hair is way more iconic. I went back and forth about whether I should paint her scalp or not. I've had trouble with the glue not sticking to the scalp, but sticking only to the paint added. But there is a huge color difference, so I just paint the middle part pink to be on the safe side in case something peeks through. To cover up the rat's nest we just created, I'm taking the next layer of hair, smoothing it out and sculpting the curls how I like, and then setting them in place with hairspray and my hairdryer. I play with the curls until I feel like I have a nice fit and set them in place. This was so much fun. I really enjoyed styling the hair. I only took the curlers out as I was going instead all at once, to make sure to not mess up the curls with the hairdryer, and it was the right call. The last curls would have been a mess by the time I would have gotten to them. I left the side curls last. To set them in place, I take out the curlers, brush them smooth, and then recurl them up using my fingers. I then add some hairspray and set that with heat from my hairdryer. This is the only place in the hairstyle I added pins to, just to give me a peace of mind that they are not going anywhere. I want this hairstyle to be permanent, so I use some glue here and there to really cement the curls in place. My hair was not extra long, so the style ended up being not as tall and straight, but more round. I still really like the end result, but the proportions are a bit off. Here is the finished style. Some hairspray ended up on her face, but I can just wipe that off with water and a cotton round. I was really contemplating whether I should add gloss to her face. I only did her lips and waterline. The eyes are so large that it would be too much to gloss the entire eye. I also drew the lashes going downwards, so it would be difficult to try and avoid them. Now I want this head to stand on top of a fake cake. I loved Hexgen's heart cake creation, but we are going for more stylized look instead of realism. We have a filament printer and a bunch of these empty rolls left over. I decided to stack two together to create a base for the cake. I had plans to make this a two-tiered cake, but it would have ended up way too large, so I went with one tier that's quite tall. After securing them together, I needed to fill in the gaps. I used plenty of hot glue and some scraps of styrofoam. I cut 2 circles out of craft foam for the bottom and top layers. I also added some old chopsticks to the middle to help me attach the head later. The chopsticks also made it easier to move the cake around while working with it. The head is currently a lot heavier than the cake, so to stabilize it, I got some quick cement and mixed it according to the instructions. It has a very short working time, only 4 to 5 minutes, before it's completely rock solid. I pour it down the middle to secure the chopsticks in place. I then mix a second batch and turn the cake to its side to start filling the rough edges. Here you can see how it totally caught up with me, and I just had to start slapping it on with my hands to try and not waste any. I then glue in the bottom layer. Back to the fake cake making. The sides were still super uneven, so next I went in with some spackle. This was also the reason why this video took so long. I had to do so many layers of spackle and wait between coats to let it dry before the next one. But it was all worth it in the end because I really like how the cake turned out. I used my palette knife to smooth out the spackle. Then it's my nemesis, sanding. This time I didn't hate it as much because the spackle is designed to be sanded down, so it was quite easy. A layer of gesso will help me see the imperfections a bit better, so that I can fill them in and sand them down again. To really achieve a smooth finish without any divots, I use a ruler. I then sand, and sand some more before a new coat of gesso. Then some more spackle to help smooth the top edge that I had beveled out with a Dremel tool. Then some more sanding and a final coat of gesso. And then 4 coats of soft pink acrylic paint. I seal the paint using a matte water-based varnish. I feel like the varnish gives the perfect fondant-like finish. It doesn't have a shine to it, but it's not ultra matte either. Then it's time to create the decorations. My first idea was to try using silicone, but luckily I found some acrylic latex sealant that was a lot cheaper, and it's meant to be painted over, so I can paint the piped details whatever color I want. I used a piping bag and 2 different tips. Piping this stuff is different to piping whipped cream or buttercream, because the acrylic is thicker and it's stickier, so it doesn't break off nicely, it kind of stretches. So I wasn't able to get nice pointy ends to my piping, but it looks like the real stuff, so I'm happy. I also tried using the caulking gun on its own, but it was way harder because you have to squeeze the handle more and you don't have as much control as you do with the piping bag. And they do look like little turds, which is kind of funny. Another hurdle I had was the drying time of these things. Because the acrylic was piped thicker than what it was intended for, it took 48 hours to dry. I then had to paint all of them in these pretty cool toned pastel colors. I also added a coat of that same varnish on top of these ones as well to help protect the paint. It was so satisfying to peel them off of the wax paper. That's what the green stuff is. It was quite fun creating all of these, but it was even more fun to get to glue them in place. I added some to her hair to tie in the 2 elements. She still has a hole on her neck from the bolts I took off, so let's fix that with some ribbon. I also used the same ribbon in her hair to tie a bow. Then it's more decorations. I needed another red element in the design, so I decided to create some strawberry slices out of this red craft foam. I first created a gradient with white. I then add some white lines going outwards. I then mix a pink color and add some lines with that. Then it's more white on top of that, and the last detail right on the center is done with pink again. I paint the very edges a darker red to look like the surface of the actual fruit. I then glue them down all along the bottom edge. Once they are all on, I seal them with a glossy varnish. Because I could not make the cake 2 tiers, I decided to add a plain circle underneath it where I could add more of those piping details and other decorations. Cut from a frozen pizza dough box and then painted baby blue. I glue on the cake and start adding my pre-made piping decorations. I'm leaving gaps here and there because I want to add some plain white piping as well. I keep the placement quite random, but I'm still creating a border at the top of the cake too. Then it's time to add the white piping. I liked the smaller grooved piping tip more, so I used that. To make the piping a little bit extra, I add these plastic hearts to it. I sprinkle them on and it totally feels like real cake decorating. I added the white piping on the top as well. I had saved some of the strawberry slices for the top too, so I just pushed them into the wet piping. I add some pearls here and there too for some difference in texture. The cake portion for this piece is completely modern because that's just the look I wanted to go for. But I have no idea what a 18th century cake would look like. Probably very different. Then it's time to slap the head on there. I shorten the chopsticks and fill the entire cavity of the neck with hot glue. The next step will reinforce the connection even more, and that will be resin. Last time I used this resin, I think I put the caps on backwards. Because I remember thinking, I hope these are correct because I can't remember which one is which. And now I can't get them to open. So I decided to saw off the caps. I wanted to make a test piece first to find out if I could use acrylic paint to color the resin and what kind of shade it will come out as. The test was a success and the color didn't darken or alter the curing process. So I moved on to mixing a larger batch, colored it using acrylic paint, and popped as many bubbles as I could with a torch, because I don't have a pressure pot to cure this in. And then very painstakingly tried to suck the resin into this syringe. But it's very viscous, but I got there in the end. I cleaned off the tip and then started squirting the blood, forbidden strawberry sauce on strategic places. I didn't want the drips to overwhelm the cake. I just want them to create a focal point and accent the cake and the head. It's so satisfying seeing it drip off the edge and pool at the bottom. I added some splatter to her cheek. Adding the resin really made the whole piece come together and look so cool. Resin is always intimidating to work with, but man, it looks cool when it's all done. As a final reference to the movie, I decided to add some tulle across her eyes, just like Kirsten Dunst has in the masquerade scene. It was one of these modern details they added that I think looks just so cool. And I think it accentuates her expression. And now she's done. I had so much fun creating this piece, but I have no idea what to call it. Is it a doll repaint, sculpture, or what? How would you categorize something like this? I hope I was able to convey my thoughts and the overall idea to you. I feel like I can't explain it. The piece just tells you all you need to know on its own. Professional artists always name all their paintings and sculptures. And I feel like if I would name this one, it would have to be Eat Cake. I did struggle with her face quite a bit, probably because it was so large, and I wanted her to have this very specific expression. And that's something I'm still working on as a doll repainter. I know the tool might annoy some people, but I just love how it looks. It makes her look more edgy. What do you like about her the most? Thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't yet done that, like this video and leave a comment. I would love to know what you think of my creation. Until next time, bye!